In today's video, we will be taking a look at my updated 2024 Senate election prediction as of today, September 26th of 2023. Now, this is the map with the safe states filled in on both sides. You can see the Republicans at 8 seats and the Democrats at 11. YPS.com still does not have the 2024 numbers with the updated Senate seat numbers. So let's get right into today's video. Now let's start off with some of the likely states, starting off with the Democratic likely states because they're definitely going to be holding on and trying to fight for most of these seats here. Starting with the state of New Mexico, Democrats were able to win the state last time by a 24% margin because Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, took away 15% of the vote that would likely went to the Republican Party, and therefore, without him, Republicans are probably going to end up losing by around 12 points or so. Now going to the next state, the state of Virginia, Tim Kaine last time round in 2018 won by 16 points. Now in a less favorable environment for the Democratic Party, I do still believe Tim Kaine will win by a solid 12 to 13 point margin in the state of Virginia. The next state we're going to be taking a look at is the state of Minnesota. Minnesota in 2018 voted for Amy Klobuchar by 24 points. Amy Klobuchar is a very popular U.S. senator, deemed moderate by many, although she's not really all that moderate, but she does have that public perception. Also speaking, this race was really not competitive in an otherwise pretty competitive state, and in 2024, I do expect the margin to end up narrowing up, but I still believe that Amy Klobuchar will probably end up winning by somewhere around 12 to 13 points in the state of Minnesota. Now going to the state of New Jersey, this race is definitely more complicated than one might think. Robert Menendez last time round won by 11.2 points. However, at the time he was indeed indicted, and later there was a hung jury on a bunch of corruption charges where 10 of the 12 jurors ended up finding that the state did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that those dealings were just simple gifts and were not bribery. However, he has been charged with several more charges, and he could be forced into resignation, but that does not seem likely at this point. There will definitely be a strong Democratic primary here, but Menendez probably will end up holding on in the primary at this point because he did hold on in 2018. If that is the case, this race will be extremely close compared to what New Jersey might be expected to be, but nonetheless, because Democrats have such an overwhelming amount of support in the state, I still believe New Jersey will probably go to the Democratic Party by a likely margin. Now finally, another state that could go to the likely Democratic column is the state of Pennsylvania. We do see that Bob Casey last time around won by 13 points. He's a very, very strong candidate. Lou Barletta was definitely not the best Republican in this race, but nonetheless, 13 points, even in an environment which is Democratic plus 8, is extremely impressive because of the fact that that still made the state vote 5 points more favorably than the national environment. If we apply that to 2024, we're definitely going to see this race being likely Democratic column. Now, I think he's still going to win by a very strong lean margin rather than a likely margin. Now going to some of the likely Republican states, we have the state of Texas. Now Texas in 2018 was actually very competitive because Ted Cruz faced a very strong candidate, Beto O'Rourke. At the time he was extremely strong. He almost pulled off an upset victory in an otherwise very, very Republican state. Nonetheless, Ted Cruz was still able to narrowly hold on, and because Beto O'Rourke has been, for example, less pro-gun, some of his values probably don't align with voters as much, though the state has shifted towards the Democratic Party by a more substantial margin. I still believe the state of Texas will be in the likely Republican category. Now to the state of Florida. Now Florida in 2018, Rick Scott pulled off an otherwise upset against Bill Nelson, who was the Democratic incumbent by a very narrow margin. I still believe that Republicans are probably going to win this race because of the fact that on the presidential level, really Joe Biden kind of screwed the Democrats over there in 2020, and the state has just become a much more closer to a Republican stronghold, and I do believe that the race will go to the Republican Party by a likely margin. Now going to the state of West Virginia here. Now, this race could be between a safe and likely, probably, for the Republican Party. We do see that Joe Manchin in 2018 won the state by 3, but that was in a generic ballot that was Democratic plus 8, not to mention the fact that really Republicans didn't give it all in this race. Patrick Morrisey was probably not the best candidate, and not to mention the fact that the state, with polarization after 6 more years, has definitely made this race much less likely to go for the Democratic Party. Now, the polling has still suggested that Joe Manchin could actually hold on to this very, very contentious race, but I still believe Republicans probably going to win this race by a likely margin. Now, going to the other lean states in this map. Let's start off with the state of Montana here. So Jon Tester, who was a tested incumbent, this is now his fourth term, and he's going to probably end up running for re-election. Jon Tester is probably a very strong candidate. He was able to win 3 times in a row by similar 3 percentage point margins. And I do believe that this race will probably go to the Republican Party because of the fact there's just more polarization in general. And this state is actually trending slightly to the Democratic Party, but overall speaking, this is still around an R plus 15 state that's probably going to vote for Donald Trump by that margin in the presidential election level. Not to mention that this in 2024, the election will be held on a presidential election year, which will probably hurt the Democratic Party because more Republicans will end up turning out and voting probably for the Republican candidate. So that's probably going to be a lean state for the Republican Party. Now going to the state of Nevada. In 2018, Jack Rosen did beat Dean Heller, the incumbent, by 5 points in the state of Nevada, in an otherwise a state that was very much speaking deemed a toss-up. So Jack Rosen did end up exceeding expectations, and I do believe that she'll probably end up winning once again by about a 2 to 3% margin because she is a pretty decent incumbent, and she did end up unseating incumbent back in 2018, defying many expectations. Now going to the state of Arizona. In the state of Arizona, this is a blue trending state. I do believe Democrats will end up winning it on the presidential election level. Kristen Sinema will probably split more votes from the Democratic Party than the Republican Party, but right now, I think it's actually closer to 50-50 in terms of vote splitting. I just don't think that Kristen Sinema is actually going to split up that many votes in general. Overall speaking, when considering all the factors, this is a very close race, but this is still probably a race that's going to go for the Democratic Party by a tilt margin. Now going to the state of Ohio here. So for the state of Ohio, Sherrod Brown did end up winning by a relatively substantial 7-point margin over Jim B. Renacci back in 2018. However, at the time, the national environment much more favorable for the Democratic Party. Many polling at the time in the state of Ohio actually had Sherrod Brown up by 15 points, so Republicans kind of gave up in this race. Renacci actually overperformed expectations, and in 2024, a lot of money will be poured into this race on the Republican side, and I'm sure Sherrod Brown is a decent incumbent in terms of electability, but he's probably not going to be able to actually win the state, and therefore I do believe that Republicans will probably win the state by a lean margin. Now going to the state of Wisconsin. Tammy Baldwin here is a pretty strong incumbent. She won by more than 10 points. She did end up running the state to the left of the generic ballot. Again, she was able to do very well in the Ron Kynes district, a strength that Democrats now lack. And she also did pretty well in the Wild County, so she had pretty much both of the areas Democrats needed to end up winning the state. And her turnout in Milwaukee and Dane County was comparably pretty good. Overall speaking, I do believe that Tammy Baldwin's going to end up winning because she is also a pretty strong incumbent as well. So finally, for the state of Michigan. Michigan here with Debbie Stabenow. I don't think she's running for re-election, but in this state, in general, Democrats, I do believe they're going to win this race on the presidential election level, as they did there in 2020 by around 3 percentage points. Republicans right now don't actually have the best candidates, and if we look at some of the trends in the state, it's much better for Democrats than in a state like Wisconsin. It's also to the left of both Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and because both of those states did vote blue, it does look unlikely that Republicans will end up actually being able to win the state, and therefore I do have Michigan as a lean Democratic state. Anyways, thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.